Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fantastic IHC event. I am Kate Bridle, your IHC events host, and I am so thrilled to have you with us here today. Special thank you to all of you for being here and spending your breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever time it may be for you with us. And thank you very much to our wonderful sponsor, Paragon Legal, thanks to whom this CLE is free for all of you. I also want to thank our fantastic presenters today, Tracy, Scanlan, Ilan, Hornstein, Jessica Nguyen, and Meredith Gordon, who are going to talk to us about how to go from proving value to delivering it. We're going to talk value, talk metrics. Let me know that you can see and hear me by popping into that chat. Introduce yourself. Please feel free to put a bio, a LinkedIn link in that chat box and start using it to connect with each other. This is our 77th event of the year, and I want to know if you are here with us for the first time or if you've been with us before. All right, with that, I will stop talking and I will hand things over to Tracy to get us started with our discussion today.
Thank you so much, Kate, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much and welcome. We are so excited to host this webinar. My name is Tracy Scanlan, and I'm the VP of Client Development at Paragon Legal. For those of you unfamiliar with us, we partner with in-house legal departments to provide flexible interim legal support. For the past 20 years, our attorneys and legal professionals have stepped in to help clients during times of leaves and backfills, when there's overflow work or special projects, or just when you need specific expertise. So what that means for me in practice is that I spend a lot of time sitting with legal leaders to find out what's important to them and the things that keep them up at night. If you were with us for our last webinar, you'll remember that we shared findings from a survey of 150 GCs, DGCs, and AGCs, exploring what metrics matter most to executive leadership. One of the biggest takeaways was that legal departments need to stop measuring activity and start measuring outcomes. So it's no longer enough to say, hey, we reviewed 500 contracts this quarter, 100 more than last quarter. Business leaders need to know what those contracts enabled. Did they accelerate revenue, reduce risk, shorten sales cycles? So today we're taking the next step in that conversation. Once you know what outcomes matter, the question then becomes, how do you consistently deliver them? Legal teams are under tremendous pressure as all of workloads continue to grow, matters are becoming more specialized, AI is reshaping how work gets done, and of course, budgets are still remaining tight. Yet many legal departments are still operating with staffing models designed for a different era, relying on roughly one of three choices. One, hiring additional in-house counsel. Two, sending work to outside firms. Or three, just sucking it up and absorbing the work. So leading legal departments that we've seen are taking a different approach. They are adopting a modern legal portfolio strategy, which means that they are intentionally matching different types of work with the right resources. So today we will explore why traditional operating models are breaking down, what a modern legal portfolio looks like, how it can improve both business outcomes and the metrics that matter to leadership, as well as practical steps you can take to begin building a more flexible, scalable legal function. I am super excited to be joined by three outstanding legal leaders here who have approached these challenges from different perspectives, and I'm looking forward to hearing how they put these ideas into practice. So I'd like to take this time to allow our panelists to introduce themselves. I will go in alphabetical order and start with you, Meredith.
Great. Thanks so much. Really great to be here on this panel with these amazing other panelists. Hi, my name is Meredith Gordon. I am Director and Head of Commercial and Corporate Legal at Mozilla, home of the Firefox browser. My team and I oversee everything. I like to see everything where Mozilla either spends money or makes money, right? So all revenue generating contracts, enterprise B2B sales, strategic partnerships, as well as procurement, vendor matters, and corporate matters. I've been practicing 20 years, started my career in a couple of big law firms in New York, and then moved into tech, spent some time at Salesforce, at a conversational AI company, and am now glad to be here at Mozilla.
Thanks, Meredith. Ilan.
Hi, everyone. A little about me. I've spent over 20 years trying to maximize the business value that's delivered by legal teams. Along the way, I've served many tech companies. I served as a chief legal officer and head of business operations at a private company. And I'm now the deputy general counsel at 8x8, which is a cloud communications company. The focus on business value has led me to create the new legal operating model, which I publish at elanhornstein.substack.com. It's my way of teaching how value is actually created and legal services add value. I made that framework publicly available so other in-house teams could adopt it, and I've implemented it myself at multiple companies. I'm also the founder of Beyond NDA, which is the world's first business enablement network. It eliminates the need for one-to-one NDAs between businesses. It's another free tool for legal teams. I'm all about helping my fellow legal professionals, all of you here, to add more value in their companies, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Ilan. Jessica.
How cool is it that your last name starts with N and you're the last to speak? So lucky me. Hi, everybody. If you didn't join a webinar yesterday, I'm here again. Jessica Nguyen, Chief Strategy and Legal Officer of Sandstone. Because Meredith and Ilan like to show their age, this is my 20th anniversary from graduating from law school.
Yes.
So you can do some math there. 2 decades of practicing law in B2B SaaS primarily. Why I'm excited to be here today is 2 things. One, I have learned a lot of hard lessons in terms of building and managing a legal team, in terms of how I resourced it, how I messaged to executives I need more resources, how I measure the impact of the legal team. I have failed on all of those fronts, and hopefully you don't fail like me. And then 2, I'm an advisor for Paragon Legal, so go Paragon.
Thanks so much, Jess. So I would like to start by setting the stage with a few findings from the survey that I mentioned earlier, because I think it's just a perfect way to frame today's discussion. So what we found is that legal departments are facing a number of pressures all at once. Nearly half of our respondents told us that they're understaffed. Operational efficiency is now the #1 priority for legal departments. 45% are actively focused on implementing new tech, and nearly 9 out of 10 expect AI to significantly change legal work over the next few years. And a third of the respondents are concerned with talent challenges. Am I going to find a great person? How long are they going to be able to stay? And can they actually use the AI tools that I'm implementing, right? So at the same time, legal leaders are being asked to move faster, support more of the business, and manage increasing regulatory complexity, all without unlimited budgets or headcount. So these findings really reinforce something that we've all been seeing in practice. This isn't just a workload challenge, it is an operating model challenge. The teams that we're seeing thrive are taking a very intentional approach. They're thinking less about who can do this work and more about what is the best resource for this particular type of work. So that can be the internal team, outside counsel, flexible legal talent, technology, or AI. So I'd like to start there. Jessica, you've worked at a ton of companies, and you've also written that many legal departments don't really have a workload problem. They have a design problem. And I thought that was a really interesting way to reframe the issue. So can you talk a little bit about that and what's changed that makes the traditional operating model less effective than it used to be?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I thought about this a lot, Tracy, because I did know about this webinar. And because I'm going to channel my 20 years experience, not just as a lawyer, but also as a mother of 3, one of the things I cook a lot is a bowl of chili. So in terms of, is it a workload problem or a design problem? I think it comes down to 3 things. And I swear it comes back to the chili. Oh, make this make sense. Just give me a second. All right. Is it come down to people, process, and technology? And in terms of workload, what you're going to find is if you unravel the process component, there's a couple things. Process is bad. Your team is working on work that it should not be working on. I know, Meredith, in our prep call, you're going to talk about how you uncovered a lot of low-hanging fruit of just eliminating low-hanging fruit. And then technology, there's a lot of work that technology can solve for. So why I'm sharing this, though, is that there are so many other options other than hire more people or pay outside, very expensive outside law firms to do the work. So as I make chili, I can break it down to, I have a really good chili. Email me later for a really outstanding recipe. Think of it as my design problem. So you need to take inventory of all the work that you're doing and then really right size what's the best ingredient to really solve that work. So I have mastered it's pinto beans and red kidney beans, but it may not be the $30 can of beans from Walmart. And so really understanding to optimize the chili results in the very end. And so to tie it back together is no longer, my mind has been open from, I did my first GC role was now about 10 years ago now, or a little more than 10 years ago now, is I can only hire more people and hire expensive law firms. There's other options. But I had to learn the hard way of really taking an inventory of all the work we had to do and right-sizing the resource to that, which now includes flex legal talent, technology, and also non-attorneys who are like experts in legal process and legal operations to really enable our team of optimizing process and within organizations. Folks in the chat, if you are in legal operations, put a little chat, high five to you, because one of my first hires at PayScale, my first GC gig, was a contract manager legal operations, and she really leveled me up in terms of developing better process and then telling me and informing me what kind of people we need to solve the operational problems she would uncover and discover, or technology.
Jess, I love that chili analogy because I think, and you mentioned being a mom, and when I think about this too, it's like you have all these ingredients, but sometimes you can add or subtract, right? Like if you have a kid that doesn't like spicy food, then you add less chilies, right? If you want more, and then so you can constantly adjust. And I think that's what we're trying to talk about today. Like, how can you have this thing that's really great and then make adjustments when needed for different situations?
Correct. Spiciness level, etc. Maybe there's a food allergy. You can adjust, but you need to take an inventory of what goes into the chili. And for that particular goal and audience of who's going to eat your chili, is this the right, are you using the right ingredients for the right outcome?
Meredith, and Jess, you alluded to this, but Meredith, can you tell us a little bit about what you've done at Mozilla? How do you think about who within the legal team, or actually not even within the legal team, maybe sometimes outside the legal team, owns different types of work? And for you, what has exposed the cracks in the traditional model?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I want to keep this chili recipe analogy going, but I'm not exactly sure how to weave it in. So I'm going to work on it. So we'll see if I can get there. But yeah, but I think where we started is this idea of metrics and what's the value that you're bringing, right? And it's not just about saying, oh, the legal team signed this many contracts or handled this many tickets, right? It's about what was the impact. And so I think drawing from that, you're looking at the work that's coming into your team and identifying what's the highest impact work, what's the highest risk work, what's the most important work, what's the most complex work, what's the sort of most unusual work versus the most repeatable work, right? And I think it's figuring out based on those classifications, who should be doing that work? How should that work be handled, right? However many years ago when I worked at Salesforce, what we looked at a lot was using, say, offshore teams, right? And finding highly repeatable, high volume, low complexity work that could be systematized, right? You build out an SOP, a standard operating procedure, and you go step by step and explain, this is how we negotiate our NDAs, and these are our default positions, and these are our fallbacks. These are the places we never go. These are the places we can go. And you give that to a lower cost outsourced team and have all the work go there. Now I think a lot of that work is going more to technology or to automation or to AI. And I do want to kind of distinguish between automation and AI, which aren't always the same thing, right? And I almost think of if you could have built a standard operating procedure for an outsourced team, now I almost feel like a lot of whether it's a skill in Claude or a custom GPT in OpenAI or just a prompt library, those prompts are like the modern versions of our SOP, right? So standardizing that process and asking sort of an AI to do a first pass rather than an outsourced team. But I think it's really about figuring out what is the highest complexity work, what is the highest impact work, what is the highest risk work, and having your most trained, most senior people handling that work, and then bringing it through the ranks from there. So your kind of medium level work, you can have maybe your more junior attorneys or maybe your more senior contract negotiators or your more senior paralegals working on that, right? Maybe the lower risk or lower complexity work, you can have maybe somebody who's more junior, who's just out of school, who's just joined your team and just figuring stuff out, can touch that. And then, and sometimes there's even a question of like, all right, is there work that's so low risk that nobody on the legal team needs to look at it, right? If you're a team that does tons of events and you're always signing contracts with Hilton and Marriott, and they're not going to negotiate their indemnification terms with you. They're just not. They are what they are, and you can throw a million lawyer hours at them, but the return on investment is not going to be there. And is there a question of, okay, maybe you can say that your procurement team outside of legal handles those types of contracts. And maybe it's a combination, right? Maybe you set your procurement team up with a skill that you've built out and you say, okay, run the hotel contract through there and make sure there's nothing super egregious in it that the AI will spot. And as long as the AI says, yeah, it's pretty much fine, then it's fine. Legal doesn't need to touch it. I've worked with lawyers before who take this approach of, but I just want to touch everything. But I just want to check, but I just want to see, but I just want to check. I just want to. And I feel when you do that, you're really spreading yourself super thin as a team, and you're not applying your resources where they can have the most impact and where they can have the biggest results. And I think that it can be dangerous when you're seeing all risk as equivalent. And I think you need to apply your resources, which let's be honest, are limited and expensive, right? You need to apply them in I think, a thoughtful and intentional way. Yeah.
Meredith, I love that you brought in the fact that other departments can do stuff. We talk a lot about like, how do you allocate resources within legal? And it's so important to remember, hey, you have options. You can help other departments self-serve. So I think that's another great point when you're thinking about allocating resources. What can we just get out of legal?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I would maybe just really quickly add
Mhm.
on the other side of things, say, for example, on the revenue generating side, I think the self-serve and the automation can often come into play as well. If you're setting up your teams with, say, a tool that'll auto-generate a contract for them based on a template that legal's already approved and already okayed. That's another way to do that. But sorry, go ahead.
No, totally. So Ilan, I met Ilan in a live event, and he was so passionate about metrics and AI. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would love for him to share his thoughts with everyone else. So I know, Ilan, you've implemented a lot of smart tech. I know you're an engineer. You have an engineering background and implemented a lot of tech and AI solutions, which we will dig in on later. But even with all of that stuff, what has become more difficult to manage over the last few years? Is it because of volume, specialization, speed, something else? What have you seen?
It's really speed more than anything. What I'm seeing is that the time from a product idea to general availability has really compressed dramatically. And legal teams can't really be embedded with every engineer or in every sprint. The old model with a lawyer physically in the room where decisions happen, it doesn't scale how businesses operate now. But what the pressure really exposed is a discipline that most legal teams have never built. And Meredith touched on this in what she just said. I have a slightly different view. My starting point is, what's the value of the piece of work that you're doing, which is something that I publish at the New Legal Operating Model. It comes from Lean and Six Sigma principles. And really value, and I'm value adding, I want to be a lawyer that adds value, right? Value in business terms is actually judged by the receiver, right? It's not the producer. So it's not legal deciding what the value of a piece of legal work is. The question is, what does it deliver to the business? And there's more details you can read up on. But the sequence matters, right? And exactly how Meredith explained it, right? You need to figure out what it is and who that value is delivered to. And then you need to be thinking about if a lawyer really needs to be one that delivers it. So here's a real example. We had a templated contract process. So there's a Word document, the counterparty fills in some fields, right? And one attorney had 60% of the work that she was working on just checking if the filled in fields are correct, right? That's valuable work, right? Somebody has to do that. And lawyers often are viewed as a trusted adult in the room kind of thing, the deal integrity insurer or whatever name you want to give it. But once you name this value, the value of this is accurate completion of a standard form. It's obvious that using a senior attorney is probably the most expensive possible way to deliver this value, right? So real value, but there's waste, which is the opposite of value. That is happening, and that is the premium that is paid, right? So what's become harder is judgment work is getting faster and more embedded in product decision. We don't have time to get there because there's valuable but misplaced work on the people most expensive to hold it. And so if you start to do some of the things that Jessica and Meredith and I are talking about, you're going to start to have more time for this very, very much faster work.
So yeah, no, that's all super helpful. And I think we all recognize that sometimes the juice is just not worth the squeeze to get a senior attorney involved. And there's other things we can do. And sometimes we're not maximizing our time and our resources correctly. But What does this look like in practice? So how do you actually start thinking about what work goes where? AI, tech, flexible staffing, in-house, outside counsel. Ilan, how do you think about allocating work across these different resources? And in particular, I'd love to hear some things that you've done with AI.
Yeah, so I guess two questions here. So I'll take them in order. First, what value does this work deliver and to whom? I just said that, right? If you read up on how actually value is created, it's either value that is expressed to a customer or to an investor ultimately, because those are the people that pay your company money, right? And that's what it means to be valuable. You increase that. So if the honest answer is that this work doesn't deliver value to anybody, then the right allocation is elimination, not a cheaper resource. Just stop doing that. Second, for everything that survives that, what is the least costly resource that can deliver that value in full? And that's where judgment density comes in. And the menu is wider than the old choice between in-house or law firm, right? Judgment work that's episodic, specialized, volume-driven is exactly where flexible things fit in, right? Work whose value doesn't depend necessarily on judgment at all, that belongs to technology. So here's a concrete example on the technology end. If some of you are familiar with the UK public sector and government framework buyers, there are standard frameworks, and each deal requires this thing called a call-off contract. The value is pretty clear, right? You need to have a correctly completed standard form that lets the deal close. Same structure every time. And there are roughly 20 buyer-specific data points that matter. There's no material legal judgment in that process. When we looked at it, we saw that it was taking us about 4 days to get from a request for one of these call-off contracts until it was completed. Not because the work takes 4 days, but because a qualified lawyer had to do it. And the lawyer was busy with work that actually needed her. So we built a tool that collects those data points directly from the sales team. And this is where an LLM, generative AI, shines, because it can interact with the people. It can handle some of the annoying, I've already told you 10 times that when you request one of these, I need to know the buyer's actual address, because that's something I have to fill in. And I don't know what that is because they have multiple addresses. You need to tell me what to put in there. Your AI system can have those kind of interaction to ensure that there's a completed request, which every legal team on this call, you're wasting days where your lawyers have to go back and ask again about the thing that they need in order to be able to start the work, right? So for that, that's perfect. And then we used a non-deterministic, meaning not the AI creating the document, but the AI creating a script that can do a substitution in a Word document of certain tags so that you have a deterministic outcome to be sure that your document is always going to be correct, right? So you use the non-deterministic LLM to have the interactions with sales, and then you use a deterministic way in order to create something that will always be correct. And in the end, I measured it 3 minutes and 10 seconds. 4 days, 3 minutes and 10 seconds. And that's how you deploy technology or something, when you know what is the value that's being delivered. So
I love that.
those are design choices that matter, right? So again, don't ask LLMs to write contracts. When they write the entire thing, you are going to need to have somebody who checks that, right? But you can use the non-deterministic LLM to have some of the interactions, and then use a deterministic process, a script, which your AI can create for you, right? But use a script to do that. So we're delivering the value the same way as before. And I have no concerns about this document going out directly to the salesperson. It's still something that is the exact same shape it would be as if a lawyer produced it. So the gain that we had, though, isn't faster lawyering. That's a key point here, right? We're not faster at it, right? But it's less lawyering when lawyering wasn't really needed.
Great. And Cynthia had a great comment. She said it's like knowing when to get takeout instead of zhuzhing up your chili, right?
I love that.
Meredith, going back to you and your example of offloading some of these hotel indemnification or contracts where there's the indemnification, you have no power over them. You have no negotiating power, right? So how do you evaluate whether legal needs to touch something versus going to another department? And also, how do you get buy-in from the other department to take on that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of the things we look at, like I said, is we look at volume, complexity, right? And risk, as well as impact, right? So fundamentally, you need to understand what the business's goals are, what their KPIs, OKRs, objectives, priorities, whatever. Everybody uses different terms, right? But it's what are the most important things that you're trying to accomplish? And how is the legal team involved in getting you to that goal, right? What are the biggest impact things that you can do? What are the highest sort of risk matters that you can take on? Are there, for example, ongoing major partnership relationships, right? That we're like, it's really important to have a senior lawyer who gets to know how that relationship works, what the complexities are. Questions come up all the time and you need somebody who can answer them quickly. And that's not the kind of thing that you can like outsource or bring an outside counsel or even like a temporary staffing role for. Versus high volume of vendor contracts, right? Lots of variety. Some are higher risk, some are lower risk. You probably need an attorney looking at most of them, but maybe it doesn't need to be a full-time senior attorney, right? Maybe it can be a flexible staffing attorney who you bring on and their hours can flex, right? Depending on, oh, this is a season when we're doing like a ton of marketing. So there's all these marketing contracts going on and our temp attorney can help us with that, or our flexible attorney can help us with that versus it's slowed down. Okay, we're gonna drop those hours as there's less need. But I think you talked about getting buy-in for moving things to other teams. I think one of the biggest things for me has been identifying things that slow down processes. And for me, the biggest thing is handoffs, right? It's when something goes from one team to another. I think Ilan said it at one point a few minutes ago, right? Where it's like the work comes in and it isn't that it takes 4 days to do, but the person who it's going to is busy, right? And they can't pick it up for a while. And you got to think every time there's a handoff between one team and another, you're having that same issue, right? It goes from me to Jess, it goes from Jess to Tracy, it goes from Tracy to Ilan, it goes from Ilan back to me. Every time you have a handoff, there's a question of like, all right, is Jess free to take it now? Or does she have to put it on hold for a couple of days? And then she looks at it and then she sends it back to me. And then I send it to Tracy and then it goes to Ilan. Every time that's a slowdown. And some of the things that we've looked at have been situations where we've seen, okay, legal gets involved at a certain point, but is the value that we're adding really so great that it's worth the handoff from team 1 to team 2 being legal, back from team 2 to team 1, et cetera, et cetera. So for example, we're looking at a process now where to join a Slack channel with external parties, we've had this process where we've said we don't want to ask people to sign NDAs if they don't have to. So the process is IT reaches out to legal to check to see if there's already an NDA in place, right? And then legal does this research and checks and then goes back to, it takes forever, right? Because the person getting the request is busy. This question is generally not the highest priority or highest impact they're working on. So instead, we're moving to a process without handoffs, right? Where we're saying, okay, we're not going to do necessarily a full-on elaborate formal NDA. It's going to be more of a pop-up message that comes up in the channel that says, hey, if there's confidential stuff in here, you agree you'll keep it confidential. And if there's already a confidentiality agreement between us and you'll keep it confidential pursuant to the terms of that confidentiality agreement. Cool? Cool. If you accept, you get to stay in the channel. If you don't, you don't stay in the channel, right? So but the point is it's keeping it all with, so it's eliminating that handoff between teams that slows things down so much. And I think the more that we can find ways to eliminate handoffs in ways where we're still at an acceptable level of risk, right? We're not saying, oh, forget the NDAs entirely. You can just share all sorts of confidential stuff and nobody cares. No, we still need a certain amount of protection, but it's finding a way to get comfortable with sort of that medium amount of protection or that reasonable amount of protection and really trusting other teams. I think Ilan said it really when he said legal's often seen as the adult in the room. It's really trusting our colleagues and our other teams to also be the adult and also be responsible and agreeing on a path and saying, okay, legal has signed off on this approach, but operationally it's going to be owned by IT or it's going to be owned by procurement or it's going to be owned by whatever other team is going to make it happen.
Yeah, so it's how can we help you help yourself? And I think that ultimately makes things better for everyone. So Meredith, you've shared, hey, there's this chunk of work that can go to IT procurement, a different department. Ilan, you've shared, here's this chunk of work, AI can handle it. And all of this is with legal oversight and buy-in and everything. Jessica, when you look specifically at legal work and in the legal department, how do you think about what should stay in-house, what can be outsourced to flexible legal talent versus what should go to outside counsel?
Yeah, there are Three components. Number one, is the work really going to be relationship based? That where it's me really relationship based, and I would want my team member to really own the relationship for the work, like a product counsel, I would rather actually keep in-house to the extent possible, because I want someone on my team to really know the product really well, understand the roadmap, the specs and all the components, and build a trusted relationship with the senior product manager, etc. The second component is the flow of the work. And it's not product counsel work, but commercial legal work. And what we're feeling that is there's a huge amount of work that is repeatable, easy to share context and train and onboard flex legal talent or law firm support. But it's always end of quarter. It's always the last 2 weeks of the quarter. Then that maybe I would consider then, hey, let's outsource that component. It's not quite a 40-hour work week job, so I don't need a full-time headcount, but we know after every and each kind of quarter, we always need overflow support. Let's evaluate a reasonable cost relative to. So Tracy, I worked for a lot of companies that sell B2B software to mid-market companies, which means we're selling software where the average contract value is $20,000 to $50,000 a year. Mm-hmm. It does not make sense for me to send each contract out. Meredith is licking her face, to a big law attorney who's charging me $500. Oh, that's for a junior associate. Probably more like $800 to $1,500 per hour to negotiate that deal, which could cost me almost as much as the ACV of that contract. And then so we would lose money on each deal when you consider customer acquisition cost and legal cost. That does not make any sense. So that's what I also think about as well, is the nature of the work, relationship based. And then two, is it the work that is predictable? I can take some legwork, but can I onboard and train a resource? And then does that resource cost make sense relative to the nature of the work, Tracy? I think I had a third component, but I could no longer remember it, but I will remember it later and I will definitely share it.
No worries. I think I remember the third component. I think I think you had mentioned like bet the business type situations, like things that are like litigate, all of these things are very quickly changing regulations. That sort of stuff is good for outside counsel because it's very important and it's contained, right? It's not like you're just sending a ton of things out to them. So that doesn't really
require an ongoing trusted relationship building with head of product, head of sales, etc. Yeah. And honestly, for the nature of that kind of work, a big litigation case that is the company type of litigation, sure, maybe that goes to a law firm.
Yeah. So now we are going to connect the dots. So I know a lot of us got into law because we didn't like to deal with numbers, and we can no longer say that because all lawyers have to deal with numbers now, right? So one of the biggest things from our prior webinar was that legal teams are evaluated on outcomes and not just activity. If you're outsourcing some of this work, it's not a great look to be like, hey boss, guess what? I outsourced this and now I'm doing 400 less contracts, right? So a portfolio strategy is what enables the outcomes. Like, how do you connect the dots with all of the things that you guys are talking about here to the metrics that really matter to the business? Ilan, going to you first, how did changing how work was allocated affect your team's ability to focus on the strategic priorities? And what outcomes improved once the capacity constraints were reduced or rejiggered?
For us, it's just our ability to explain how we're delivering more value, because we are able to deliver the better outcomes and we're able to deliver better value. The most important step on that journey, though, was to replace perception with a measurement, right? Which we're talking about metrics, measurements. And these measurements, they only make sense once you look at it from the receiver side, right? The person that actually, where it is that value is delivered. So it's not the legal internal things, how you measure your own work, but it's that outcome view, the value delivered view. So the business, for example, doesn't experience legal activity. It experiences elapsed time in a value stream, right? So how long does it take to get the contract done from start to finish? And you all know that's not just legal. But there was a standing assumption, legal is the bottleneck in the sales cycle, for example. All these anecdotes about, oh, I waited for legal, blah, 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 right? So that, we mapped that, right? And so going from memory now, so this is approximate, but this is how it was when we looked at it. Average time to complete was around 18 days. So time waiting to be assigned to a lawyer, 7 hours. Time actively worked by legal, about 24 hours. Time waiting on inputs and approval from outside legal, 16 days. So think about that. What does it tell you? Right? And just as importantly, what it doesn't, right? So we knew and we could explain now that legal controlled roughly a day and a half of an 18-day cycle. So the delay is not legal. And if you add lawyers or make lawyers faster, that doesn't really move that number. What we don't know is what's the 16 days, right? There are some things that happen outside legal's frame of reference, right? And sometimes the 5 days it might take for someone to approve something in another function it's valuable. It's value adding work. It has to happen. Should it take 5 days or 2 days, right? That requires working together with other functions to figure that out. But you can replace perception with measurement, right? And that's why measurement matters and why metrics matter, because it ends the wrong argument and it starts the right one, right? We fixed what was inside our own frame. We can do things around intake quality, right? We can make sure tickets arrive complete, right? That's a best way to deploy AI right now, in my opinion, is put it between you and the requester to make sure that you get completed requests, because they can ask those questions you ask 100 times to the same person over and over. And we also help the business a map to where to look next, right? If we want to compress that cycle from 18 days to something less, here's where to go. And by the way, we'd love to help partner in this, right? And we also know where reclaimed capacity should go, not into shaving hours off of a one-day legal touch, right? But looking at the work that actually needs a lawyer in the room and being able to focus on that. And if we're adding capacity, that's where we're adding it.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's about like relocating the capacity. You can focus on more strategic things, and be proactive. That's ultimately also going to help the business.
Exactly. Sorry, just part of
Yeah.
how we flex too with demand is exactly also this thing we've been talking about, the third option. Don't forget it, right? You can use flexible talent for the judgment work that comes in surges, right? But that for which the value, as we were just talking about, $20,000 total contract value, that's not outside counsel work, right? But you have quarter ends, you have launches, right? For you guys in the consumer who are direct to consumer, the launches are a huge driver of work, right? Permanent headcount may not make sense, and firm rates make even less sense. So now that you start tracking things, you can explain it, right? You can explain that 24 hours it takes to do something. You can do that with the third option, using a flexible pool, using something that can help you. So legal productivity is your operating leverage. And operating leverage is value that you deliver to the investors or to ultimately the customers who are going to pay more or you're going to increase sales. But you can only explain that or make that claim if you start measuring every resource the same way.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Meredith, for you, can you share a before and after example where changing your resourcing model materially improved your outcomes?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think we talk about tying legal work to outcomes, right? And I think part of that is, and we touched on this briefly before, understanding your business's goals, understanding your KPIs, understanding what are the things that you as a company are measuring in general, whether it's on a quarterly, half, annual basis, as far as your company's success metrics, right? And then tying your work to those success metrics. So it's not legal turn this many marketing contracts, but it's legal closed this marketing deal, which resulted in this much of a bump in usership or in customer base or in whatever, if your KPI is user count or customer base, right? It's legal oversaw the execution of these major revenue generating contracts that resulted in this much of a percent of bump in, revenue in this quarter, if one of your KPIs is meeting certain revenue metrics, right? It's really drawing for your leadership and for other teams a clear connection between the work that legal does and the KPIs and goals that the company is trying to make, right? Because nobody cares you turn this many tickets or you close this many. People care. We enabled this much revenue. We enabled this much customer market growth. This is what we have enabled. This is how we are your business partners to help you achieve your business goals. And I also think when you start focusing on sort of that higher impact work and you start spending less of your time and attention on the stuff that nobody really cares about, right? That's when you're seeing that increased impact. So for example, us saying, you know what, we're not going to waste a bunch of time on hotel contracts. We're not going to waste a bunch of time on the contracts where we're ordering custom swag. We're not going to, mainly we're going to rely on our business partners for saying they know what the stuffed dog is supposed to look like and what the t-shirt is supposed to read. And listen, you guys read the statement of work. If it's right, we trust you, you own it, let's do this thing. And instead focusing legal resources on those deals that do, or those matters or those tasks that do tie to those KPIs and those company objectives, and then being able to report out on most of our legal time is now being spent on our highest impact matters. And so that's been a big sort of turnaround for us and a big thing that we've been able to do and report on and say, listen, this is how this resource, this legal team resource is being deployed.
Got it. And Beth had a great question in the chat about how do you measure the business lag time? And there's a bunch of legal intake tools. And then what if you don't have the budget? And so Jess had just a great idea of just using a spreadsheet. And I think this is also another way where you can use AI to help you. You can type it in, how do I use a spreadsheet to do this, right? And so you don't have to, if you don't have a budget, you don't have those tools, you can do that first. And then maybe you can build a business case for having a tool, right? There's options. Jessica, I wanted to ask you, so you've got all this stuff in place, right? I feel like you know where the work should be going and you've implemented it. So when you're evaluating whether your portfolio strategy is working, what metrics are you then looking at? What is compelling to leadership? How are you showing them like, hey, look at what I'm doing and it's actually working. Look at these metrics.
I think Meredith already said it quite clearly it's really about laddering up your own legal department metrics to the metrics that the company cares about, and then to whatever function you're talking to cares about. So if it's sales, you're supporting sales, they care about revenue growth. So how are you enabling that? They care about, in terms of the sales, I'm going to pick on the sales organization, because at a top level, company would say, we care about growth. Okay, that's pretty broad. And the sales organization, we care about growth by meeting certain revenue targets each quarter and also speeding up the sales cycle. Okay, so then how does legal help enable that? By saying, hey, we touched X amount of revenue per quarter. This quarter, we touched 80% of the deals, which had 100% conversion rate. Oh, we also help speed up the sales cycle. Last quarter, it took 18 days to close out the deal, but now we've reduced it by 2 days. That means the cash in hand has been now 2 days in your bank account, on our bank account, more quicker. So to be frank, you have to take you can't just report on how much onions I cooked, chopped up, or how many cans of beans. You have to describe, you have to pick up the chili, and you have to provide the chili, and you have to make the kind of chili that eater of the chili really cares about. So for my kids, it's chili without any sort of dairy products in it. But if it's a different eater, they might care about I want a little bit of cheese on it, and that's okay. But making sure you tailor the chili to the person that's going to eat it, really.
Yeah, I like that, working backwards. And I think that's been a theme throughout this webinar is like, value is determined by the recipient, right? And as lawyers, ultimately, we are client facing, we're in a client service business, and these are our business clients, and this is what we have to do. So that all is super helpful. When we start thinking about how to actually start, right? If you haven't thought about this before, if someone wants to start building a more modern portfolio strategy tomorrow, Jessica, how would you recommend they get started?
To go back to what I said earlier, is really start off with doing an inventory of what kind of work your team is doing today. Having a really good understanding and how much time it's taking to do the work. So not only the nature of the work, the volume of the work, and how much time it's taking to do the work. And then also mapping what are the goals of the company, and then also evaluating, doing the 3 people, process, technology of all the work that you're doing. Should you be doing it? And how can it be solved? Can it be solved through technology? Could it be solved through better process? And could it be solved through more people? And then what kind of people is another analysis part of the component. I'm less structured than Ilan. I'm not looking at any notes or anything, but the people component to do an analysis of, hey, is it going to be an in-house resource? Is it going to be an outside law firm resource? Or is it going to be flex legal talent or similar type of resource? If people is the solution to that. That's the way I think you should think about it, is do an inventory, have a clear understanding of your company's goals, each department's goals, your legal department goals, and then build out, assuming you understand what the problems are after doing all that inventory and blah, 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 making sure that the solution is people, process, technology, and doing a deeper dive there. What's the right solution based on that?
Got it. So you got to assess everything first and then make the decision.
Mhm.
Meredith, asking, do you think, like, where do you think teams commonly get stuck here? Because I think Jessica laid it out really clearly. It's, oh, you do these things. But as we know, it's not as simple as just following the steps, right? Are there any parts in the process where you think teams might just get stuck?
It's totally simple. It's just, you just do the inventory. No, I'm joking. There's a million places you can get stuck, right? First of all, I think it's hard to say, all right, we have a ton of work on our plates. We're all super busy. So let's take on an additional project, right, of analyzing and inventorying. And even though it's super valuable and in the end, it pays for itself, it can be difficult to say, all right, we're going to budget some time to do these things, right? But I think it's about identifying it as a priority, getting buy-in from your leadership, selling leadership on what the long-term benefits are going to be so that it is something that you can do. And I think part of it is just get started. And even if you can't get through all of it, right? Have one sort of brainstorming session. Book 1 hour with your team where everybody just, virtual whiteboard or physical whiteboard, if you're actually in the same place. What are we spending our time doing, right? What's eating up most of our time? What are the really annoying things that keep creeping into your day and maybe don't take up that much time, but they happen over and over again and they're just distracting you? What feels like big work? What feels like medium work? What feels like small work? What's the work that you're doing where you sit there and go, really? I went to law school for this. Maybe those are the places to start, right? The things where even your team is saying, I don't think you need me to do this. Right. And I also think, frankly, look at your processes and see where things are getting unnecessarily complex and where there's a lot of handoffs. And I think that can be low-hanging fruit and an easy place to start because, frankly, nobody likes, I give it to you and then I wait and then you give it back to me and then you wait and then we play back and forth. Right. And even if it means asking another team maybe to own a piece of the process they didn't own before, you'd be surprised how willing some teams might be to take that on if it means they can own the whole schedule and they're not waiting on anybody else and then getting stuff dropped back in their lap when they're not expecting it, right? So I think I love the idea of the whole inventory and doing the whole thing, but I would also say get started. And even if you get stopped partway through, take what you have and start small and do a little bit, do a few small things, clean up a few processes that have a lot of handoffs, figure out if there are some things you can automate and use those initial early wins, selling point, and as a marketing tool to sell, whether it's to your leadership or to whoever. Look at what we were able to do with just a little bit of time and a little bit of resources. Can we get some more so that we can have even bigger wins? And it might even be an opportunity to bring in somebody on sort of a flex basis to help you with it. If you're like, listen, I don't have the time to run this project. Maybe there's sort of an operations person who could come in on a part-time or a short-term basis and help you with that. I think that's another opportunity if you're saying, I don't have the time to find more time.
Yeah, that's always a struggle. I think, just getting started is such a huge thing, Meredith. I feel like in our experience, we find that a lot of teams really get overwhelmed with the choices, right? Do I need a CLM? Do I need this tool or this tool? There's so many things to research. I need to make sure I have the best one. And it just gets so overwhelming. I think just getting started, to your point, or Jessica, using a spreadsheet, like writing something down on pen and paper, getting the 1 hour with the stakeholders, I think is so significant, and it builds on itself, right?
Yeah. And I think I was just, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think maybe one other thing I would add there, and thanks for the ops shout out. I do actually have a background in legal ops as well. So I think it kind of comes out in situations like this where I'm like, just start, just do a little thing. But I think part of it is also this sort of lawyer tendency to let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
And so it's like, just try a thing, just write a spreadsheet, handwritten list, something. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time out. You can always, in software, there's sprints, right? And you do a sprint and then you iterate and then you refine and you refine. Just do an MVP, do a minimum viable product launch, and you can make it better as you go. Don't worry about making it perfect. Trying to make it a little bit better the first time, I guess, is what I would.
Yeah, that's great advice. Ilan, what about your experience? What have you found to be the fastest way to demonstrate ROI from this portfolio shift?
Yeah, I would underline about just getting started and doing something. And what I think you should do first is really just understand what the point even is of the work that you're doing. Many lawyers, we just do what we do. And often you will do exactly the same thing working at 3 different companies or at different times. And guaranteed, it's not going to be the same value everywhere, right? And we don't really do that. We talked about we are going to do more or faster review of our sales contracts and figure out how to do that or do that. What's even the point of you reviewing the sales contract to your company? What is even the value of that? I created a fictional example of a cheese quality inspector. I've been writing about this, and to illustrate how the value of being a cheese inspector for a restaurant can be different, right? In some cases, quality matters, in others it doesn't. The role is different, but as lawyers, we always go to perfection, exactly what Meredith just said. Don't let perfection be the enemy of the good, but as you start to look at it, the first thing is understand what is actually valuable about what you're doing. Why does it even need to be done? And so to answer your question, what's the fastest way? The fastest ROI is arithmetic. And you can just take one high volume workflow and name the value of every step. What is the point of what you're doing? How does that actually add value to your company? You just can do it. You don't even need any tool or anything like that. You just do that. And you'll find 2 things, right? You're going to find steps that deliver value to nobody, and that's stop those. Just stop it, which is the hardest thing to do. I talk about that. The hardest thing for lawyers to do is actually to stop doing things. And then there are things that do deliver value, but maybe they're not done, and that's harder. You should go look at that, and we talked about that. Just do something, right? But the steps that deliver real value at a lawyer premium, figure out some other way. Technology, process, less costly resource. You've got a menu of choices, right? The value is going to keep arriving, but the premium is going to drop out when you start doing that and you're creating things, you're creating space. But you can prove things inside a quarter. The call-off tool I described earlier, the first thing I did it was a custom GPT. Now it's a Claude Cowork tool, right? The first thing was still kludgy. Technology improved. Now with Claude Cowork, it's just working, right? But you don't start with the perfect, right? So the only thing though is if you just stop at these things and all you're proving is that legal can spend less, then you haven't really done everything you should be doing, because that's just stage 1, right? The funding mechanism, right? The actual return is what you do with the reclaimed capacity, right? The valuable work that you weren't delivering before. And if you ask me right now from my team, that's getting legal guidance into product decisions earlier. I touched on this a little bit. But to me, that from a value perspective, what's valuable, what's going to get customers to pay more money for our products is that. And if you define value the way I do, where you look at true business value that can be added, right? Judged by the receiver, and it's anchored in your own company's value stream. And I know I'm using some terms here, but check out my newly operating model to figure that out. We can't cover all of it in this webinar thing, but that return is going to come also in the way that you use business speak with your counterparties, because you're no longer talking about a KPI or a legal thing or a vague thing. You're talking about the actual business value that you're able to deliver, and value is not vague, right? Something you can point to and how the company makes money.
Yeah, it's got to be tangible. Panelists, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. So out of all of these pearls, if you had to leave our audience today with one takeaway, what would it be? And I will go in reverse alphabetical order this time. So Jess.
Oh man, so I did not win the lotto in having my last name be Nguyen in this instance in the most appropriate non-HR violation way. Size doesn't matter, impact does. So as you measure all your productivity, the volume of work, always connect the dots for the business to communicate value and impact to the business. Again, they just care about eating good chili. They do not care about the process of making the chili. They just want to see the results and the impact that you have made to really drive making delicious chili. So make good chili, and I can send you my recipe.
Thanks, Jess. Ilan, what about you?
So to me, takeaway, if the only output of what you're doing around this is lower legal budget, then you've undershot, right? Cost reduction is your smallest prize on the table, right? Legal function that's organized around value is what I advertise. And I didn't know about this chili analogy, but to do quickly, a chili analogy is what is the nutrition delivered by your chili? right? And are those things that are in there really delivering the nutrition that is needed?
Meredith, bring us home.
Yeah, I guess I would say be thoughtful about the work that you're doing. I think a lot of legal teams have such a great volume of work and so much pressure on them. They just run on autopilot and keep doing all the things that they've been doing. And just because we've always done it this way is not a reason to keep doing it. So take a moment, take a breath, think about what you do, think about why you're doing it, think about what the impact is, how it ties to your KPIs, your company goals, and then just start. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be complete. Just start thinking about ways to make things a little bit smarter, a little bit more impactful, and really think of your legal resources as an expensive and limited resource that needs to be deployed in an intelligent way, and figure out where you can, where you can deploy that most impactfully and most meaningfully.
Great.
While having delicious chili.
Yes, absolutely. So before we jump to questions and before we wrap up, I just wanted to leave everyone with a final thought. So one of the privileges of my role is that I've gotten to work with legal departments for many years across many stages of growth, industries, and through all kinds of business challenges. And even though every legal team is different, the consistent pattern is the highest performing legal departments are not the ones with the biggest budgets or the largest legal teams. We'd all like to think, hey, if I have this much money or this many people, all my problems would be over, right? The legal landscape has really changed. When I was in law school, we used books and rudder guides, and Westlaw was like a new fancy thing, right? And the new advancements in technology, current events, and macroeconomics have only accelerated those changes. So the most successful legal teams are asking the necessary question, how do we design an operating model that gives us the flexibility to meet the business where it is today, and also where it's going to be going tomorrow, right? Without rebuilding everything. So that's ultimately what today's conversation has been about. Last year, we talked about proving legal's value by measuring the outcomes, but you cannot consistently deliver those outcomes if your operating model isn't designed to support it. So the legal departments that are pulling ahead aren't just adopting AI or experimenting with flexible talent. They are stepping back, looking at their legal function as a portfolio, which provides them the option to scale up or down. They're refining how legal delivers value and constantly assessing that. And they're moving from being reactive to today's workload to building a legal function that is resilient for what is coming next. So I really hope today's discussion gave everyone a few practical ideas you can take back. And as a free bonus, you get a chili recipe if you ping Jess. And so we've all seen that even small changes in work can create really meaningful gains in capacity, speed, and strategic impact. So thank you all for joining. If anyone has questions, throw them in the chat, raise your hand. We would love to hear from everyone.
Yes, please do. And while we're waiting to see if there are any more questions besides the recipe, of course, thank you so much to all of our speakers today. And thank you, Tracy, for moderating and leading the discussion. I think this was a really great conversation, and really appreciate all of you sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us and with our audience. And speaking of the audience, thank you to you as well. Thank you for being here. And I need to go grocery shop and get my stuff for the turkey chili that I make, because I'm in a chili mood now. It's going to be a whole situation. We appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for staying with us past the top of the hour, for those of you who did that. We hope to see you on the next one. Please go to our upcoming events page, which I'm popping in the chat right now. We've got a lot more webinars coming up. We also have some cool in-person events coming up. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, I'm not seeing any questions, so I think we're just going to give time back to our presenters and the rest of you, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you so much,
Bye.
Kate.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.